now comes off of a year-long back and forth of how you really can't accomplish anything in this one short period of time. And so before we end, and before we even get going in this part, an invitation that one of our goals in opening this up tonight was to explore the possibility of opening up not just these conversations, but these opportunities to build relationships. And so, in our own ways, after this gathering, I think we'll try and circle back and identify who's interested in that. But I guess I just want to acknowledge there's a little bit of an irony in getting together for an hour and a half conversation organized by 4 people who believe that the only way to actually impact culture and get in deep and not just do broad strokes to matters that could take and probably will take a lifetime to maybe even shift just the littlest bit, that's a duality we're working within, but an open invitation that, whether it's once a month at One World or in other settings, and maybe also with a little bit more engagement with some of the texts from our tradition, that this might not be a one-time thing, but that this would be an ongoing conversation, especially for those of you that are interested in the power of what relationships and ongoing conversation can be. So with that being said, would somebody from one of the groups,
Okay, I'll speak from our group. Shalom, peace, assalam. They all mean peace. It's a different way of saying peace, and they all convey the same message, that we want the peace that comes from the Creator only to be the peace that you feel in your heart. We started out by saying we can agree to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. We do not have to agree on everything. However, we must be willing to listen. We must be willing to grow. We must be willing to learn. And we also said that it's important that we come from a position of what is it that we have in common? What can we say about all 3 religions? That our father is Abraham, peace be on him. He's the father of the Jews. He's the father of the Christians, and he's the father of the Muslims. So these commonalities are important. And we also said that we need to go into these areas that make us a little uneasy. This is one of the ways we grow, by being a little uneasy. How can you grow if everything you say somebody agrees with it? Where's the growth in that? Ben Carson did say one good thing, and I'm not being rude. He said if 2 people agree on everything, one of them is not necessary. Because what's the sense in having a conversation? And I fully agree with that. And our discussion was very, very, very stimulating. But those are some of the points. And this brother here talked about if it's binary, 1 + 1 doesn't have to equal 2. It can equal 3 or it can equal 4, it can equal so much more. Because what? The brain is not limited. The brain is expansive. Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say, out of this group, and I had to respect our Muslim sister, and she had the strength enough to stand up and express what she expressed. But we believe that the deep problem that's in society today that causes racism is racial images in worship. And we believe that the solution, that the answer, is to remove all racial images out of worship. That we shouldn't use not one race, I don't care if it's black, white, yellow, red, to portray God. And this is the problem. This is the root of the problem. If we want to remove racism out of worship, well, we're going to have to take race, we're going to have to remove all that idea that the creator of the heaven and earth is the family that one race is a family of God. When you portray one race as a family of God, then we know that God is superior. And that we know that His children will be superior. So we ask Him to remove all racial images out of worship. Thanks.
Next group.
That interestingly leads into our conversation about cultural images, how media portrays things. Okay.
Right. Okay, so we kind of started the conversation off with the media and the media's portrayal of people, religious people. And since I'm Muslim, I can speak from my perspective as a Muslim. And I was kind of giving the story of how I'm Muslim, I'm African American, I'm indigenous American, I was born in Chicago. Yet when I look at the news, anytime there's a Muslim representative, it's usually someone with an accent or someone from another country. So one of the things that we were talking about was how that the media is instrumental, in influencing the minds and getting people to think that for at least Muslims are something foreign. Whereas you have people like me, I'm a Muslim, but my religion also is geekism. You know, I love geek stuff as well. So when doing things like this, sitting down, talking to people, if it's a Jew, it's a Christian, whatever faith you're in, sitting down and talking to someone and getting it from the horse's mouth, rather than looking at TV and getting an image or a narrative of who someone is from television, we should sit down and do things like this. This is awesome. This is great. It just should be proliferated and spread out, and we should do it more and more and more and more, because this is how you get a true image of who someone else is. You shouldn't go to an atheist and ask them, well, what do those Muslims practice? What do they do? Does that make any sense? That doesn't make any sense. If you want to know something about a Muslim, you should go to a Muslim. If I want to know something about a Jew, I go to a Jew and so forth and so on. So one of the main things we talked about is how media influences these images of people, and it sort of keeps racism and classism and all these things going. So when you actually talk to people, that kind of kills that whole false narrative that's created by the media.
Broke the rules too in the end. Two spokespeople.
Yeah,
Just
Well, we have broke the rules, so you might as well too.
I guess another point that came up out of our group conversation was that largely the ethos, coming out of university. What is the basis for understanding and respecting the sacredness in the other? Like in Islam, we have the concept of the ruh, the spirit that was blown into the human being, being the child of God, or these within other faiths. And so, if we sit down as a people and was mentioned about you have ethical humanists, what is the commonality that we have where we can recognize that which is sacred in every human being? And once we start the conversation there, whatever emotion comes up, we're able to move beyond that and still maintain the conversation because we respect that.
One of the things that's so fascinating to me, right, is we talk about ruh, and in Hebrew, that's in Arabic it's ruh, and in Hebrew it's ruach. And when, you walk into the room and you say Salam Aleichem, and every Friday night at Shabbat dinner we sing a song that says Shalom Aleichem, and all of these things, and somehow what gets news and what gets coverage is when we hate on each other. So, I just happen to be someone that actually believes this is one big game of dominoes, and it is the healers versus the destroyers, and I do believe that there is more goodness in this world than there is brokenness, but the power of what it means to come in together and we're building a relationship, I appreciate, is something that we have to work, because there's all these mechanisms against us. There's all these systems that have maybe looked to capitalize on other things for a variety of reasons. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, moving right along.
Okay. Well, we had a different conversation. We wanted to get to know who we were first. Had a bunch of different people who never really met each other. So introduced ourselves and talked a little bit about where we were coming from. And what we talked about is what would we look to do together? How would we like to see this kind of thing evolve? We talked about getting together, being able to ask tough questions comfortably. Not that everybody would always be comfortable, but how do we challenge and find out and learn in an environment where it's okay to ask that, and we're not doing the thing or asking them, but if we need to get to know, we talked about that as a group. We talked about a couple of things that we would love to see in the world fixed. I think the first comment was healthcare came up. We'd love to see that improve for everyone. For me, it was a big deal. I would love to see us all get to a point where everyone has an opportunity. It doesn't matter what you look like or sound like or where you came from, but everything's a lot more equal on a starting spot. And if I had my druthers, it could fix the world in one shot. And a lot more economic diversity, which would allow for everything else. But we talked about sharing. Those of us who were non-Jewish, those of us who were Muslim, those of us who were Christian, those of us who were somewhere in between. Getting to know each other, being able to ask, where does this come from? What does this mean? Why do we do this? And one of the things that I'd love to see is a place where we get together as families. I have 2 kids, and I look forward to my kids seeing that everybody's got an opportunity, and everybody's different. Everybody's got something interesting, and we're still all the same. So I would love to see that as we get there, not just these critical thinking, but be able to do both in some form and make these fun. And we've done some things over the years that have really allowed us to push a little bit and ask, and hopefully we can do it again.
So there's one other thing from the group that I thought was important that kind of moves us to the next part of this as we kind of wrap up, and that is the question was asked, well, is it just going to, there are 2 things. So we would like to see a safe space to talk about things, to ask questions, to really honestly get to know. It's really bugging me. I see this on the news. What is this really about? One of the times I get called off to D.C., I go to Washington Theological Seminary, and there's a class on religious violence with a professor who works at, I think, the Holocaust Museum. He does a class on biblical violence, calls it divine violence, and he talks about violence in the New Testament or biblical Old Testament, the Torah, and then he talks about jihad. And so I had to come in at the end of this class to talk about jihad. So it was a really loaded situation. But we built a relationship from that. And so now I'm going to speak about this summer, Abraham and the Quran. Well, but the point is that having that uncomfortable moment, you can sometimes get to really know somebody else and then feel more comfortable with that person and have a genuine relationship, and it can grow to something else. The second part was actually having a community, like not beyond just a talking point or a meal. Can we actually have a community? Can we go to each other's homes? Can we go visit each other's houses of worship? Can we actually have, you want to go to a basketball game or see the Orioles or the Ravens? Can we do something that we actually build friendships and relationships? And we're not just always talking about or responding to something that's happening on the news or that makes us kind of get together. And so that was, did I represent those accurately? Okay. So those are 2 points that they're kind of say, well, what's the point? What are we going to do after this?
So I want to suggest that if there's an opportunity, especially I imagine based on the list we talked about today and the number of people in the room, that if there's an opportunity for anybody who's willing to make sure that Maddie has your contact information, I would love to propose that we get together again. And I would love to suggest one of the things that we had talked about as a group, as of colleagues, and came up in our group was it would be amazing if in the next conversation we add one more voice, maybe 3 more voices, depending on how you look at it, but that is the textual traditions that we come from. And with your permission, maybe when my colleagues and I go back to our next lunch together in a month, we can think of what a topic might be or one general category to get us started based on some of maybe images. I can hear some things that have kind of come up in multiple groups. And to see, in Judaism, there's a few different places that have value. And in the American Jewish community, we put an emphasis on the synagogue, the house of worship. But there are other houses that really matter. And one of them is the house of study. And the house of study is not a place where there's like all of this formality. And I mean, there are times where you sit at the feet of your wise elders and they teach you things. But most of the time, that's before or after a large chunk of time where it is so loud in the room that you can't hear each other, except that you hear what another group of people are talking about based on the same kind of wisdom they're learning together. I'd love to challenge us to start to build some relationship with one another in ways that our textual tradition maybe has some similar things to say, with the hope that over the course of a few meetings, we'll be able to figure out if we have some momentum of regular, what I would call repeat attenders. And then, because I think one of the challenging things, Tariq, but also one of the greatest opportunities of, I think, keeps us coming back to each other, and will hopefully keep some folks who came tonight back to another thing, is that I believe safe space is created and trust is developed only after you start to get to know each other. So on some hand, I need to thank you all for just diving in, because I think that in my group and in other groups I've overheard, I mean, things were said that we don't even know each other's last names, maybe even our first names, and we started saying things. But I actually believe that if we can start to build some relationships with one another who are interested in these conversations, and we can get to some conversations that have some worthwhile opportunities for, in Judaism we call it machloket b'shem shemayim, which is arguments for the sake of heaven. That actually Judaism really doesn't care that much about the outcomes as much as it does about the process to get there. And the idea of two people debating in holy argument for the sake of something bigger is understood to be like the sharpening of a sword, and that every side gets sharper as it goes and it figures out that tension against each other. I'd be willing to bet my tradition is not the only tradition that speaks about holy argumentation. So, other thoughts, other questions?
We actually have a little more time.
Okay.
And I think that since we have, and I was hoping that we have brought up several ideas about what we want to do next. I'd like to suggest that we have 10 more minutes of conversation on our group, and we come up with some pretty strong sense of what we want next. What do you want? How do you want this to continue? What's the conversation that needs to happen? We've heard some ideas. The idea of breaking bread together. We have smaller groups where we meet each other's families. How intimate can we make this, or how conversational can we make it, or how do we want to have opportunities for study? What does this turn into next? So go back to your groups. We're going to have a very short amount of time, so try to get this out as much as possible, and then get new people to represent it, and we'll have one last talk through, because we have until 7:30.
And it doesn't have to be one specific thing.
Yeah,
It just can be dynamic.
We're looking for the ideas here.
Right.
Yeah.
My friends, some conversation.
What?